It is inherently human to perceive some kind of presence in inanimate objects. Even those who chuckle at shamanic rituals and deny the spirit inhabiting Mount Fuji can't help but flinch at the thought of damaging a loved one's photo, for example. About 500 years ago, musician Silvestro Ganassi wrote that the very best paintings are so true to life that they were said to lack nothing but a living breath, and the best musicians made their instruments sound so human that a body seemed to be all that was missing. Right around the time Ganassi formulated these thoughts, a precious object was created in the city of Naples, one that would, as if through some miracle, endure the coming centuries almost completely unharmed and has thus kept its voice to this day. And when there's a voice, there's also a breath. It was this instrument, the oldest harpsichord preserved well enough to still be playable, that Catalina Vicens dedicated her recently released CD Il cembalo di partenope to. Now located in the National Music Museum of Vermilion, South Dakota, crossing the Atlantic wasn't the only hazard this instrument endured. The previous owner, upon inheriting it from his parents, almost trashed the instrument, believing it to be some sort of weird toy piano.
I'll bet I know something you don't know. What's that?
It was some years later, in 2002, that the harpsichord was discovered on eBay in miraculously good condition. John Coster, who oversaw the instrument's translocation and dating, has called it a time machine to the 16th century. And while that, as well as the harpsichord's mechanical construction, might have compelled some to make the first ever recording of this instrument nothing but a dry catalogue of sound samples, Catalina Vicens took a very different approach. The entire conception, as well as execution of Il cembalo di partenope, evokes the very identity of this instrument. Instead of dissecting it like a scientific specimen, it is rather understood as a messenger from the past, having something to tell to those who listen. The central thought here was to imagine the lives this harpsichord might have crossed paths with over the centuries. To this end, Catalina Vicens incorporated a broad spectrum of culture surrounding this instrument into the conception of this project, from Neapolitan history and myth to arts and literature. The music is drawn from a range of different sources, including a book published only some years prior to this harpsichord's construction, the Frottole Intabolate of Andrea Antico, which is incidentally also the earliest printed book of keyboard music. More remote in time, but closer to this harpsichord's Neapolitan home, is Antonio Valente's Intabulatura de Cembalo, from which Catalina Vicens included a piece called Gagliarda Napolitana, which not only demonstrates her virtuosity and spirit, but also offers a glimpse into the life that once surrounded this instrument. A less conventional but nonetheless highly interesting choice for the program of the CD is the inclusion of several compositions initially published for the lute. With fascinating results, Catalina Vicens is thinking outside the box here, this box being labeled music for harpsichord. The Renaissance musician didn't usually consider music to be bound to one instrument or the other. As the term instrument suggests, lutes, harpsichords, or viols were simply means to musical ends. In this light, it shouldn't be surprising that musicians often played multiple instruments, and thus the writing style for keyboards and lutes was not seldom astonishingly similar. One of my favorite tracks from the CD is, in fact, from a lute book published in Venice by Ottaviano de Petrucci, an Italian song intabulated by Juan Ambrosio Dalza. While the music and the context of this oldest playable harpsichord help us to understand it better, it's the instrument's voice itself that makes it come to life. The age-old presence one might very well believe to sense in such an object speaks most clearly through its sound. And it is here that I must mention the importance of recording process and production for this record, since the harpsichord with its complex acoustic profile is among the most difficult things to capture properly and thus calls for a skilled engineer. With the label Carpe Diem Records, Jonas Niederstadt has produced a selection of recordings featuring music more or less closely associated with lesser-known chapters of its past. Having collected quite a few of them already, I'd call their unifying characteristic a pronounced consciousness for the capturing process and its part in the artistic result, something I also recognized in Il cembalo di partenope. I'm particularly happy about how the room's reverberation is balanced with the direct sound coming from the instrument. At no point is it, as so often on such recordings, drowned in the acoustic, and instead speaks very distinctly without ever feeling too dry either. Under these conditions, we listeners have the chance to follow Catalina Vicens' interaction with the instrument closely, as if looking over her shoulder, and her performances on this disc seem to me as if permeated by a sense of respect, not as in distance or fear, but instead the sense that it's far more than some expensive wooden box she has under her fingers there. In the album's introduction, she speaks of how the instrument shows her the paths that can be taken and those that cannot. It is this conversation between the artist and her instrument and how it is captured that make Il cembalo di partenope a truly fascinating record. If this short introduction managed to pique your interest in the CD, the next step would be the website of Carpe Diem Records, where you can listen a little closer or directly acquire it, either digitally or in physical form. For more on the performer, there is also a link to Catalina Vicens' own site in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to support what I do, please consider telling your friends about my show. Memo is a project I started in the hopes of introducing many new listeners to this kind of music, and the only way for me to reach them is through your support. For more videos like this one, you can always visit my website, musicamemo.com, where you will not only find all previous episodes, but also a newsletter to which you can simply subscribe with your email address. This way I can send you a message whenever I release a new episode, which usually happens once a week, right before the weekend. So I hope to be seeing you next Friday for another installment of Memo.